Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen, a special edition post-game live stream. A disappointing loss, to say the least, for the Pitt Panthers as they lose to Boston College on the road. And I think that to some people, this is probably a good ending because I think just a 5-game losing streak, an embarrassing way to go out. Major issues with true effort to say the least, when it comes to the players, but also the coaches. I thought a number of coaches looked lethargic tonight. I thought Pat Narduzzi looked lethargic afterwards. Multiple miscues on defense. The offensive line was a major issue again. It's consistent. Nate Yarnell did not look good while he did not have a lot of help up front. He got beat up quite a bit. We'll go over a number of the stats here tonight, but overall, it's a disappointing way. And I talked about this in my tweets and my show last Sunday, which we'll still be having a Sunday conversation tomorrow. Just a horrible way for Pitt to end the season. This couldn't have gone any worse. To be honest with you, it wasn't a game at all, from a number of different aspects. And while I'm going through my monologue here, I'm going to let people get in here. Obviously, now between Twitter and YouTube is about 105 people in here so far. Again, guys, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and also, too, when the comments start coming in, super chat button is down below. Make a small donation, and then we'll be able to put your question up on the screen, and we'll be able to talk about it. But before we get into it again, guys, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. They do a tremendous job from top to bottom between customer service, run by two great pitmen who are major factors in what we do in terms of Alliance 412, the University of Pittsburgh, which is a preferred collective of the University of Pittsburgh and acquiring talent. They do a tremendous job between multiple different beers, lagers, you can name it. Obviously, too, the Icy Light Pitt can is another one. It's another factor as well. Please go see my friends at Colonial Beer, located 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Also, too, the show is sponsored by Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson, an attorney on your side. Right now, with many people struggling with the economy and rising costs, they're helping many people and businesses with their debts, and they're offering free telephone consultations to assess all options available to those who are struggling, no matter the type of amount of debt. You can reach out to them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Again, I use Brian personally for everything that I do. He does a tremendous job. He doesn't treat you like a number. He treats you like an individual. He truly wants the best results for you, but more importantly, the amount of work that he does in the community is incredible. On top of that, he's a tremendous pitman. Again, another season ticket holder, a great effector in terms of Alliance 412. He's a great person, comes from a great family, someone who can truly get you the results that you need. Just give him a call whenever you really have those questions. He'll guide you in the right direction because he cares about your needs and your results. Again, reach out to them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Guys, again, as we get into it here tonight, there's going to be multiple things. The offseason really starts now. There's a bowl game left. Getting to 8-5 would be better than 7-6. But for the majority of the time, when we look at this from a perspective of what this truly looks like, call it what it is. It's an epic collapse. When I look at Pitt, there's numerous injuries. Again, and I told people this prior. I'm telling you this now. To the people that called me crazy early on, there's a reason why Eli Holstein was the starting quarterback going into the season. There's a reason why he was the better quarterback, and you watch that in live time. I still give credit to Nate Yarnell, a tough dude. I mean, he took a beating today. I've got questions for Coach Darvo, where how is Jackson Brown not starting a right tackle? Isaiah Montgomery had 4 or 5 penalties. Really had a really bad night overall. It really just didn't play well at all. I thought the offensive line in general did not do a good job. Could not get a push in the run game. Desmond Reed got hurt during the week during practice. I heard about that. Didn't know if he would be able to go or not. He wasn't able to go. Boston College was really game planning, and their game plan really around him. When you look at what, him not being there, that would only made it worse. Derek Davis played, I thought, an okay game. Jules Goff played an okay game, but when you don't have any push up front, you don't have any holes to run to, it's a major issue. Kanate Mumfield, who usually does a great job. I thought he had a good game, but not a great game. Just from what I watched, he didn't get a lot of separation. Kenny Johnson had himself a hell of a game. I thought he played a tremendous part in what goes on. From all intents and purposes, there are a number of guys in this football team that Pitt will look to keep. They will not keep all starters. I would expect a number, probably into double digits between players going into the portal. I expect that to happen fully and into full effect as this season goes on. There's obviously stuff behind closed doors that players deal with that don't have anything to do with football. A lot of stuff with family, why they're going to be moving back in terms of family, what they need to do. And also, too, we'll get into tonight the future of Pat Narduzzi. And, there are some people on X that don't like they call me an eternal optimist. No, I'm just a realist. Pitt is not going to fire Pat Narduzzi, guys. He's got a little bit over $35 million plus buyout. It's just not going to happen. The only way that he is relieved of his duties or no longer the head coach at the University of Pittsburgh is the fact that he goes into retirement. And there's a conversation, and I can assure you from multiple donors who have spoken, from multiple people behind closed doors, I can assure you that there will be conversations about that. There will be conversations about that overall. I thought game day coaching, you look at Narduzzi right now, and again, I've had my quarrels, I've had my problems with Pat Narduzzi, but, I think he's done a good job, but not a great job. I think the last 2 years have been epic collapses, obviously. When you look at the last 2 years in 2021 and 2022, they won 20 games. After that, when Pat Narduzzi, I give him credit for this because there's got to be some credit given here. When Pat Narduzzi has a talented football team, he wins football games. I mean, that's a fact. We had a number of games this year with bad officiating, bad overall calls, injuries galore. I mean, the amount of injuries that Pitt suffered this year was just absolutely ridiculous on all fronts. But at the same time, though, you have to look at the overall scenario and wonder, there's got to be some changes here. I think that, I think Randy Bates is a tremendous football coach, but the amount of times that between him and Narduzzi deciding to blitz, that was a problem. Boston College couldn't run the football today. Which was, stopping the run is number one, but then they couldn't stop the pass. I don't know what happened with Javon McIntyre and Donovan McMillan today. For whatever reason, they just refused to turn around. They were blatant, I think a couple of them, there were underthrown balls that probably shouldn't have been pass interference calls. But if you just turn your head around and play the ball like you're coached to play it, you don't run into those issues. That's been an issue. It's really been on all fronts to where it just continues to change on a dime. And there's just, if you watch this team, you cannot tell me when you watch this tape. And if I can go over again, I'll go over tomorrow before the Sunday conversation. Obviously, if you don't know, we have a Sunday conversation at 7:30 tomorrow. We'll dive into it more as I look at the tape, and we'll get more questions in there as now the offseason has truly begun for Pitt football. There are going to be a number of transfer portal additions. I know for a fact, there's going to be a lot of guys that are in the portal now, the offensive linemen that Pitt are going to be going after, defensive ends. There's going to be players that do not return. I think there's going to be a number of guys pushed into the portal. That's a fact. But guys, there are going to be players. There are going to be players that go into the portal that are starters that are just, checked out, and I think there's some guys that need to be pushed to the portal to create space. I think that needs to happen now because now we're in a business aspect of college football. I think some guys need to move on. There are going to be conversations behind closed doors about, guys that go into the portal. It's just such a horrible way to end the season. And, while I'm not like a lot of other fans, I'm not going to blame everything on coaching or everything on players. I mean, you win and lose as a group. It is what it is. There were so many injuries, but then you're understanding why certain guys are playing. There are certain guys where you understand why they're playing and how they play at a certain level. I think this is an opportunity for Cade Bell to really grow. The one thing that was very noticeable this year was the fact that there was always a true fact that when you look at this team, there were guys that were checked out. Nakai Johnson going to the portal was not a a surprise at all for me. The temper tantrum that he threw on the sideline during the Louisville game because he wasn't getting a lot of snaps, that's questionable. He was kind of pushed into the portal at that point. You're going to see other players go into the portal at that point. But there needs to be changes. On the offensive side, potentially new offensive line coach, potentially, a new running backs coach. I mean, there's just a number of different areas. You look at the drops that happened later on in the year. The number one team with the most amount of drops this year was actually Georgia. We were actually number 3 in drops overall. Just very uncharacteristic. Good to see Gavin Bartholomew get a number of catches, though. He had a drop, but he had multiple TD catches. There just needs to be a lot done. And I know, again, you see it just all the time between Pitt Panther, what's the Facebook group? Pitt Panther Fanatics, fire Narduzzi. Guys, I mean, they're not going to fire Pat Narduzzi again. He's got a $35 million plus buyout. I mean, he's not going to get fired. In the meantime, I'm going to be interested to see what goes on as the season goes on and what happens. If he goes to retire, I think that more than likely he gets another year, and then maybe there's something worked out in terms of retirement. We'll see what happens there. But he's reached the point where, I've got questions about him. But when you look at what Pitt needs to do, Pitt is better served at keeping Pat Narduzzi, obviously, because the buyout's too big, and using that money towards revenue sharing. The revenue sharing has now begun, and I can assure you Pitt's going to be very active in recruiting. There are going to be certain amount of guys that go into the portal that are pushed, certain amount of guys that were starters that will go into the portal. Pitt will go into negotiations with a number of these guys that I think deserve it. Guys, on the defensive side of the football, you want to keep Javon McIntyre. You want to keep Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles. Those guys are all there. Braylon Lovelace, Cameron Lindsay, he's going to be good in the years to come. Jordan Bass, Jeremiah Marcelin, those guys. Up front, you want to keep Jimmy Scott. You want to keep, Sincere Edwards. I would think Sincere Edwards is probably a guy that's really up in the air at this point, depending upon if he moves back to Florida or wherever he goes. There's been a lot of conversation behind closed doors about that. There's a lot of stuff that's going to happen here. It just did not end the way you wanted it to. To an extent, I think fans have to understand there was a lot of injuries, and you watch this team. For instance, there was no up-tempo from what we've seen. If you look at the first game of the year, the second, the third, the fourth game of the year compared to now, they were never up-tempo. There were certain guys that didn't understand the playbook well enough to go up-tempo. The offensive line was behind in terms of up-tempo. In offensive line play, Ryan Bayer, B.J. Williams, Jackson Brown, Caleb Holmes, those are the guys you really want to fortify your offensive line with, and really start to build on top of that. And then, Terrence Enos is still there. I think he's really good. I think he should still be there. But they're going to need to add 2, 3, maybe even 4, potentially 4 offensive linemen in the portal. There'll be certain guys go in the portal that I don't know why they will go in the portal because they won't get picked up anywhere else, but it is what it is at this point. Pitman Zach, appreciate the super chat. Guys, if you've not done so, to get your question on the screen here tonight, because I know there's going to be a number of different conversations here. A number of people in the comments section, obviously. Thank you for the super chat. Extremely disappointing how the season ended. Have a bowl game left. Enjoy the show as always. JJ Pitt going to go hard in the portal for offensive linemen and cornerbacks. To your point, Zach, yeah, they're going to go pretty heavy on offensive linemen. They got to go heavy on defensive ends. They got to go add at least a couple corners, a couple, maybe 1 or 2 safeties. They got to add potentially a running back, dependent upon that. I think they're going to need to add a tight end and then probably 1 wide receiver, maybe even 2 wide receivers, depending upon who stays and who goes. It's just disappointing to see, Raphael Poppy Williams, who had a tremendous season. I mean, for the first 6-7 games of the year, the amount of drops that he suffered just fell off. I know we were missing C.J. Lee in this game. I think C.J. Lee is a tremendous football player. He'll be back next year. Him and Raphael Poppy Williams. I would imagine, obviously, Lamar Seymour. He's going to be a guy that probably hits the portal. There are a number of guys that probably hits the portal. I think overall, this is going to be truly one of those seasons where there's going to be some turnover. Pitt certainly had a lot of talent going into the season, but when you have a lot of guys get injured, your starting quarterback gets hurt, Branson Taylor goes out. You had, a number of guys. Branson Taylor goes out. Lyndon Cooper goes out for a portion of time. You've got influx on the offensive line. It just got materially worse over the time period. Wide receivers dropping passes. Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein. Again, Eli Holstein is the future of this team. He will be back. Just got to get better protection for him. And I think just add a couple more playmakers. Demarion Folks, he just got offered by Missouri. They're going to try to throw the bag at that kid. Pitt's got to hang on to him because I think he's an early, a freshman, a true freshman starter. I think he can get a lot of time as a true freshman. There's a couple other guys that are currently in there now, but they're going to have to get really busy when it comes to getting into the portal. Will, thank you, sir, for the $5 chat. Obviously, Pitman Zach, thank you for the $10 chat. Will, thank you for the $5 chat. I have no doubt Pitt will up their NIL budget and have quality starters, but I feel like the bigger programs will separate themselves with better depth. Probably with better depth, I would think, Will. But also, too, let's be realistic, too. Michigan lost a lot of players through the portal this year with a new head coach, and they were truly a 6-5 football team. But let me tell you something. They just beat Ohio State, who spent $23 million on a roster, and it looked horrific. I think money will have to do a lot of aspects of it. I think that overall, when you look at the football teams around the country, you still need to use the eye test. You still need to use the old ball coach test where you're evaluating tape, because there's going to be guys that are overlooked in any type of aspect, whether it's football, basketball, you name it. It doesn't matter. You still got to evaluate the players that are there. But I think going forward, this is a football team that where you're going to have to find those diamonds in the rough. I think overall, when you look at this team, when you look at this team from an aspect of where it started to where it is, there's going to be a lot of questions overall. But the NIL budget is going to be bigger. I think that when the university, obviously, if you've not seen that article by ESPN early on in the season with Chris Bickle, the CEO of Alliance 412. Also, too, guys, I will say, if you are not a subscriber to Alliance 412, now is your time to get on board. I saw some comments on X, and you can do what you want. It's your money at the end of the day. I mean, you do what you want. But, I saw this stuff between, we're just going to stop giving money to Alliance 412. I just think that's stupid. I mean, how does that truly affect the football team in a positive way? We need to get better talent. It's that simple. It has to get better overall. I think from an aspect of where this goes to, I think hand in hand, there needs to be more buy-in from the fan base in terms of Alliance 412 to pick up better players. Now, does that completely resolve Pat Narduzzi and this coaching staff from absolute blunders of what they suffered early on in the season? Hell no, it doesn't get rid of them. I think at the end of the day, there's still some very bad coaching aspects of what they did that where you just had to say, what the hell were they doing? I think there was some really bad coaching overall down the stretch. That's a fact. But I'm an Alliance 412 member because I just the opportunities are there. And one of the things that I look at from a perspective of how Pitt really responds to this point going forward is the fact that when you look at this team right now, the only way that you can get better at this point is by adding more talent. And to add more talent, I can't even say this enough. You need to add better players, and you need money to do so. Does it mean your whole 85-man roster is full of guys that are getting paid big money? Hell no. No team's going to be doing that. But I think any good football team, you're probably going to be between 45 the 55 guys that are probably getting paid and probably producing at a high level for this team. Kind of how I see it. For everyone that's in here right now, we have over between X and YouTube, we have 735 people watching the show. If you've not done so, hit the like button down below. If you're over on X, head over to YouTube, hit the like button down below, hit subscribe, share this with your friends. And obviously, too, to get your question up on the screen, make a small donation to the program, hit a super chat button, hit the super chat button, make a small donation. Thank you to Pitman, Zach, and Will, as always, constant and frequent members of the show, and just tremendous questions. Will, to your question there, too, Stanford did hire Andrew Luck today. Andrew Luck will become the general manager of the Stanford football program. For me, I think overall, when you look at Pitt, Alliance 412 and Pitt really work hand in hand to this point. They're two separate entities, obviously. I think they're going to work probably a lot closer as we get closer to the next season, how they combine or what they do. But Doug Whaley, a former general manager in the National Football League, is the general manager and business development of Alliance 412. I kind of see him as the general manager of Pitt at this point and player acquisition, what they do going forward. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It just, the commitment to Alliance 412 needs to be better. I've said before, when you look at Pitt, if every season ticket holder just did $20, the base minimum, we would raise over $6 million a year. That's not even including the mega donors who produce multiple $1 million a year. It's going to go up to that level where it continues to get better and better and better. But there's going to be some hard decisions going forward for Alan Green, the new athletic director at Pitt, as he continues to make hard decisions. There's going to be major conversations going forward. Heather Light's no longer there to where things just are going to stay in the status quo. Alan Green's going to get to that level. Alan Green's going to get to that level to where he's going to produce and what he's going to want to get out of the program. He's certainly going to work already. I know people for what I do for a living, being in corporate America, I've heard, Alan Green's already working behind the scenes in terms of business development with corporate sponsorships, ways to make things happen there. I think he's doing a really good job behind the scenes. He's only been, at Pitt for roughly 2 or 3 weeks. By the time we start looking in like December and January, we'll probably have a better look. Coming up this week, we've got signing day. We got signing day coming on board. We got players coming on board. I think now you're probably going to get those guys on board where there's going to be a number. I think probably if I had to bet from between players that have contacted me, probably 12 to 15 players, 12 to maybe even 13 players that'll be joining, Pitt in the spring. I think that'll be big to put them in the system already. And then you're going to have Pitt be really busy in December and January in terms of, production in the portal. They're going to go after certain guys. Obviously, that stuff costs money. The biggest thing they can do now is, the one thing Pitt does sell really well is that players who leave Pitt to go somewhere else do not produce at a higher level. They actually play worse. So, there are going to be certain guys that understand that. Guys like Kyle Lewis are a true professional. I know Pitt's going to do everything they can to make sure he stays here because he's a true professional how he does his work. But it's got to get better. It has to get better from a standpoint of where does it go from there? How do they build on top of that? They need to get better player acquisition from top to bottom. It's going to get busy here pretty quick. I mean, the season truly officially ended today. And, you worry about the trend of, what was Pitt? 3-9 last year, 7-5 this year. So 10 and what is that? 10 and 14 in the last 2 years. You can really have a strong discussion to say, is that the right way to go forward? Is there a projection base going forward with how Pitt produces players and how Pat Narduzzi produces players? Again, I think that maybe, they need to move on from guys like Randy Bates, what's his name? The offensive line coach, Darvo. There's going to be questions about that. I thought the offensive line rotation was absolutely horrific. I think some guys regressed at that area. I still say, obviously, you look at guys like, Ryan Bayer, B.J. Williams, Terrence Enos, Jackson Brown, Caleb Holmes. That's kind of your forefront, maybe even Ryan Coretta. Those, 5 or 6 guys there. And you probably want to add 4 to 5 guys through the portal. It gets you to 9 to have some type of depth, but, it costs money. So, my biggest thing is, guys, the Alliance 412 stuff comes into play right now. And you look around the country, it's a major factor in what we do going forward, and it's to get better player acquisition. We got to get more active in NIL, because you saw the depth was an issue for Pitt this year. If Pitt doesn't get hurt overall, if Eli Holstein stays healthy, if Branson Taylor doesn't get hurt, I truly believe Pitt probably goes 9-3, 10-2, because I think they win the UVA game and they win the Clemson game. Just kind of how I look at it, we're at those two games right there, and then potentially one more in between when you watch a couple of those other games, even the Boston College game. This is probably a different game with Eli Holstein in it. Just the offensive line was still, struggling as it is, but it's kind of what you have to see and what you look at it with. Again, thank you to everybody for the super chats. I really appreciate it. Let's see here. Wolf HD. Again, sorry guys. Between all the comments that come in, I just see a lot of times. I just see the super chat ones. So again, I appreciate all the super chats when they come in. Easier to see those ones. Wolf HD. Honestly, just a disappointing season after seeing the Pitt Cuse game in person with the support and movement of the team. Pitt had a chance to really be a great this year. Instead, we tumbled to mediocrity. Yeah, man. I mean, it is what it is at this point. It's hard to watch. Justin Bozeman, I'm not sold on Holstein. This offensive scheme working here still. The spread doesn't work in a northern city with bad weather half the time. Get a better pro-style coordinator. Justin, I mean, I completely disagree. There's numerous teams within the Big Ten spectrum, the ACC spectrum, also too in the Big 12. A lot of teams in the Big 12. I disagree completely. I think Eli Holstein, especially you watched those first, we were 7-0 with Eli Holstein. We were 6-1 with Holstein playing a full game. With Holstein playing a full game, Pitt was 6-1. I mean, that's kind of how I see it, man. I think he did a really good job for a guy that's a redshirt freshman. We have to go to the spread because that's what college football is at this point. We watched. I mean, you're saying get a better, a better pro-style coordinator. You look at the past two. I mean, holy hell. I mean, we were absolutely horrid. I mean, even for how bad this offense was down the stretch, we still scored 23 points tonight. I had Pitt in my. I didn't get to have my pregame out, but I had Pitt losing this game 31-21. That was pretty damn close. You just can't have it happen. You just can't. But I mean, overall, you have to. When you look at this team, you have to have a spread offense. You can't have a. I don't personally. I don't want to go back to a pro style offense. I mean, after watching Signetti and Sean Watson, I'm definitely not going back to that. I mean, that was horrid. Even for how bad this offense was towards the end of the year, they still produced more points. We were never against Boston College. We're not scoring 23 points. We weren't scoring 23 points this year with Frank Signetti here. With our offensive line play, could you imagine with this offensive line us running the football as much as we did? We would have never been able to run the football. I'd be honest with you. If Eli Holstein doesn't play at all this year, Pitt maybe wins three games again. Kind of how it is. He can make all the throws you need him to make. And like you said, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, he does have better tools. I mean, overall, I mean, he's a guy who's more active in the run game. He can run for sure. I mean, to be quite honest with you guys, I mean, there's not a really hard decision there. I mean, you can watch. I mean, with your own two eyes, you can watch and see Holstein's a much better quarterback than Nate. And I love Nate. I think he's a tough son of a gun, man. He got beat up today. The amount of times he got hit. I mean, I mean, shit. I mean, he's a redshirt freshman too. I mean, to put up his numbers that he did this year and the time span that he did as a redshirt freshman, I mean, I'm not buying into that stuff, guys. I can't. I watch the games. I go back and watch the film. Yeah, we went down the field in the first drive of the game easy. If he just floats the ball to Konate Mumfield, he gets a touchdown pass there. But hey, It's a learning curve. At the end of the day, he's a redshirt freshman. And then Pitt, again, that next drive, if he doesn't get hurt, they're still moving the ball down the field again. The game completely fell apart when those changes were made at quarterback. I mean, completely. So I don't know if I agree with that. Anthony, fans shouldn't be donating to Alliance 412 only when we are winning. Completely agree. Anthony, I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, if anything, the Alliance 412 stuff is more needed during the times that you're losing because you need better player acquisition. I mean, that's kind of what it's there for. When you're winning, you already have it. Now, obviously, when you're winning, you still want it to be more. When you still need it then because you want to still attract more talent. If you're winning, you have better players in your team. You still have to pay those guys. But overall, I mean, again, with every season ticket holder jumping on board, paying $20 a month, $20, it's $6 million plus a year, not counting the mega donors that are involved as well. And look, there's a bunch of us where, I think $20 means the world. I mean, I started at $20. I'm at the 412 level, $41.20 a month. I went to that level because that's what I can do. The $20 a month, I think, that still means something, and then you have the mega donors that are getting on board. You're having more people involved there. But overall, I mean, you got to support it now more than ever because we need to acquire players. But guess what? We also need to retain players that are currently here right now that played really well this year. Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace, all those guys that need to be back next year. I still think Jimmy Scott, Sincere Edwards, Francis Breu, Sean Fitzsimmons, Nick James, those guys up front. I mean, from front to back, you've got really, you've got, what's his name? Jimmy Scott, Sincere Edwards at the defensive end position. Then you've got, and at the defensive tackle position, you got Francis Breu, Sean Fitzsimmons, Nick James there. All three of those up front. I think those are three massive names that you need to keep up front. At the linebacker level, you got Rasheem Biles, Kyle Lewis, Braylon Lovelace, Jeremiah Marcelin, Cam Lindsey. I think those guys, you got a good group right there. On the back end, you obviously want to keep Javon McIntyre. You want to keep Shadarian Harrison, Rylan Gandy, Taman Lynham, Cruz Brookins, and then you want to add potentially maybe a corner or two corners, or maybe a corner and then two safeties in there. You still got guys in there. Tamarian Crumpley's part of that group. You won't have to pay much, for him because obviously he didn't play a lot this year, so he should be staying regardless. On the offensive side of the football, up front, you've got Ryan Bayer, B.J. Williams, and then Jackson Brown. Who's the other one? Caleb Holmes, and then Terrence Enos, and then probably Ryan Coretta. And then obviously you're Eli Holstein. You've got him there. And then who else is back there? Obviously, too, you'll have Jules Goff back year. I don't expect, Montrevious Lloyd was hurt again, but he didn't play much this year. I would expect Montrevious Lloyd to hit the portal. I'd expect Ty Diefenbach to hit the portal. Possibly Julian Duggar to hit the portal because obviously they, for a walk on the play over both those guys, that's not going to go over well. Even though I think Ty Diefenbach should have been in the game between last week and this week, but that's a whole nother story. I think Derek Davis, he potentially would be back, or he'll probably hit the portal to go somewhere else where he has an opportunity to play more. They got to keep Desmond Reed. That's a guy to keep in touch with and keep here for. Wide receiver position, you lose Konate Mumfield to graduation. He's going to the NFL. Got to try to keep Kenny Johnson. You hope to keep Kenny Johnson. It's probably the best wide receiver you'll have returning next year. Then you have C.J. Lee, Raphael Poppy Williams. You'll have Demarion Fulks in here next year. If they can hold on to him and hold off Missouri. I would think Lamar Seymour goes into the portal. Chade Nwoku, I would think he probably goes into the portal. You can do the numbers and look across the board and see who goes into the portal and who doesn't. I mean, there should be a number of guys that do. But overall, on that roster, from what I named on both sides of the football, maybe you got 20 to 30 guys you keep, in that range. And then the rest you're trying to build up with your freshman class coming in, retaining the freshman class you have behind you on top of that. So between those two classes, probably 10, 20, 30, 40, you got 40, 45 guys there to keep, and you have about 40 open scholarships on top of that. If you push certain guys out, you want to be able to attack the portal in certain ways where you can grab certain guys. Pitman Zach, I got to check. I thought Lyndon Cooper was a veteran, didn't have any time left. I'll have to double check. I'll have to go through those numbers there. Again, if you're in here, guys, comment section, hit the super chat button, make a small donation to the program, get your question up on the screen. Obviously, appreciate Pitman Zach and Will, obviously, for the super chats as well, and always appreciate the support as always. Because obviously I don't see all the chats coming in, so I can't see them all. Will, to your point about a track and field scholarship, no, I mean, you're not going to get a lot with that. And that's going to be another question, too, down the road. What sports are still at Pitt? Like around the country, I've heard from numerous people around the country, there's going to be major cuts in terms of, athletics. Teams that just aren't making any money, they're more detrimental to the program or university. They'll probably drop those. That's going to be a question for Alan Green going forward. Overall, I don't think so, Will. I think that's a true, how do I want to put it? That I don't think you can get a full scholarship for them. There's going to be some major changes coming forward, guys. I mean, the offseason has started, but also too, they need to push some guys out. And I know fans will lose their mind when players start to hit the portal and stuff like that. But when you go on an existential collapse like Pitt has, where they went 7-0 to 7-5, for where we are in terms of college football, this is more of a business than anything else. You need to push certain guys to the portal. If they're not producing at this level and they're not playing and they've been here for 3-4 years, you got to push those guys out to open up other spots to bring on other guys. It's just a fact. You got to go out and get other guys. It's a business now. 3 or 4 years ago, or even 2 years ago, I'm all about keeping guys. If you commit to them and they commit to you, you keep them on the roster. But now it's all about money. It's all about certain players being here. I think there's other guys out there, potentially guys that they're looking at to bring in here to where they're going to need those roster spots. And it's coming, But then at the end of the day, like any other program around the country, I told people going into this year, there were numerous people that reached out to me and said, oh, there's no way Pitt wins 9 games in 2 years. That was the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. I couldn't believe people were even saying that, because I knew Pitt had talent. They changed their scheme, and it got us to where we are today. But the injuries just slowed us down. The bad offensive line play, the drops slowed us down. They couldn't go as fast as they wanted to. The last 4 games, we have not moved fast at all in terms of up-tempo pace. We had to slow the game down because guys weren't able to keep up. There were numerous guys that just couldn't overall jump on board. It's a fact. Let's see here. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do a post-game, a nice little post-game debacle here. In the chat right now, I have posted the live stream. Let's see here. I put in the live stream. If you want to join the show and have some comments, obviously, for the show, you can jump on board. We'll have it there. We'll see there. Overall, guys, though, you have to look at this from a perspective of where this goes from here. Pitt's got to start adding guys to the portal. It's going to get busy here again, guys. And again, I saw the comments again for the people that are just joining. Obviously, now we have 803 people. We have 803 people on the show right now between X and YouTube. I have them both up on the screen. If you're in here now, the super chat button is down below to get your question up on the screen. If you want to have your question up on the screen and talk about it, make a small donation to the program and the podcast. Make a small donation to the podcast, get your question up on the screen. We'll be able to talk about it. And then also, too, hit the like button and subscribe and share this with your friends, obviously, and post on Facebook or whatever. But, guys, Pat Narduzzi's not going anywhere. I mean, I keep telling people this because, it's not that I don't want to move on to go into anybody else. And I know the comments on Twitter and stuff like that, and I see them, and it's just pure stupidity. I could be one of those people that just jump on here and just tell you guys what you want to hear, but it's just not a fact. The buyout's too big. That money can be used towards NIL because I think it's where it's going to go to at this point, because obviously there's going to be a major jump. Pitt's going to be spending a lot more money in the portal now and through NIL and revenue and whatnot and revenue sharing. It's going to be there. So I think overall, Pitt, what they need to do is find out which guys they want to keep. They want to keep on this team, pay those guys, and then really sift through this roster and figure out which guys should stay, which guys should go. It's that simple, and I think that comes down to it, to where they got to be able to push certain guys out and really bring some guys in. That's what it comes down to. And I think there will be an evaluation period, to be quite honest with you, on both sides of the football in terms of coaching. We could potentially see some changes coming up here pretty soon in terms of coaching standards and which guys are here, which guys are not. And the thing that really, when you look at overall with Pitt, you hear, and obviously I talk to numerous people, guys, between the program and, donors and whatnot. You look at Pitt, especially too, you look at the postgame show, or the postgame comments from Pat Narduzzi, the press conferences that he has. He just looks exhausted. That's just me. He just looks tired. There's a lot of changes in college football, and I think that really a lot of teams are going to go through it. I just personally hope that, no matter, my debacles with and my problems with Pat Narduzzi, or, the overall aspect of Pitt football, he is the second, he's ranked second in Pitt history in terms of wins. I would kind of hope that he goes out on his own terms. I don't want to see him get fired, because I think he's that, he's done that much for the university. I mean, at the end of the day, he's had a number of good seasons, obviously an ACC title, a Heisman contender. I mean, all those things are all working in his favor at this point, but we need better player acquisition, and that starts with NIL. That starts with player retention. Pitt has done a good job at really player retention for guys that want to play. You know what I mean? And I saw last year between the fans saying, "Oh, we were going to be horrible this year because we lost Deion Hayes, or we pushed Deion Hayes," and same thing with Sammy Okunlola. It was a completely different story. We ended up turning around and having a better season to begin with. But the overall aspect is they have to go out and acquire more depth, but also more competition in all aspects of the football team. And again, better players. Players have to play better. There are certain guys in this team that quit towards the end of the year. I would push those guys out immediately, because they're not useful. If things get rough, I mean, what the hell? I mean, you got to push those guys out. You just can't have them on the team. It's kind of how it is. But overall, I think that when you look at this roster and you look at the coaching staff, there should be some changes. I think that on the offensive side of the football, I think you need better, potentially some better recruiters on the offensive side of the football. I think you need more development guys in the offensive side of the football. There's just some things that really got to change. And we got to see that going forward. But this is just not a good way to end the season. I thought personally things would have really changed if Pitt would have won this game. You're going 8-4, and then you got a bowl game left, and you potentially go 9-4. And I understand too, you look at what happened today with Michigan and Ohio State, the money's not all be all. I mean, there's a lot of coaching involved there. Ohio State loses to Michigan, a 6-5 Michigan team. Michigan has done a really good job of getting their donors on board. I thought they really dropped off this past year, especially for how they recruit. And Michigan really recruits a lot of the same players that Pitt does. We're really in the same circle. And if you talk and you look at all the offers and you look at the players that are more into Pitt and more into really committing to Pitt, there's a lot of conferences and really the same strategic plan of how we recruit compared to Michigan. They've just done a really better job of getting their donors on board and really buying into it. And then you're watching this class that they currently have right now really just turn up. Michigan ends the season 7-5 after a victory today. It's from top to bottom, guys. I mean, it's just kind of how it looks at this point. But obviously, guys, again, we're down to the final some final minutes here. If you haven't done so, hit the super chat button down below and make a small donation to the podcast. We've always appreciated it. If you want your question right on the screen. as we go through here, going through some of the stuff here, obviously there's a number of comments in here. I'm going through it now. Another Wombat. Just a terrible game. I agree. O-lineman Adam. O-lineman DN, veteran wide receiver, power running back. There should be a focus of the portal. Yeah. A number of different areas where they need to get better and recruit better. We'll see it through there. But guys, obviously, if you've been on the show before, obviously appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Tomorrow we will have the Sunday conversation tomorrow at 7:30. We will have that on board. I'm going to go back and watch the tape tonight, have more of a conversation tomorrow, but we'll be recruiting tomorrow because signing day is upon us this week. If you've not done so, hit the like button down below, hit the subscribe button, subscribe to the show, just subscribe to the podcast. We really appreciate it as always. Tomorrow's going to be a good show as we really get into the offseason of Pitt football, who's potentially going into the portal, who's not going into the portal, who's potentially going to get commit to Pitt. We're hearing more and more. Personally, there's a player, a wide receiver that Pitt has committed, Khalil Sterling. Whether he stays committed to Pitt, I'm not sure if the coaches like what they've seen previously going forward, where I'm not sure if he's going to be committed very much longer. Maybe open up a scholarship there. Just looking at a number of different guys through the boards. But right now, tomorrow for the Sunday conversation, we'll touch a little bit on the football game that happened today, but also, too, the offseason has officially started, and we'll talk about recruiting, transfer portal additions, coaching staffs, all kinds of stuff, and potentially other news around college football. Mac Brown obviously fired from North Carolina, a veteran coach there. Gus Malzahn, UCF head football coach, just resigned at UCF to take an offensive coordinator position at Florida State. That was a massive move today. I think Arkansas. I think right now, I think overall, I think when you look at the Pitt from a different aspect and a different standard, I think that we got to watch and see what they look like going forward. So a number of different topics this coming week, especially too at the ACC. What we're looking at in terms of football teams that are going to have head coaching positions. West Virginia got smoked today in Lubbock, Texas. I think it was 54-9, 56-9, something like that. Does Neil Brown stick around? Does he get fired there? So a number of different stuff just across the board. What we'll be talking about this coming week. Guys, cannot thank you enough for joining another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Cannot thank you enough for your support of the podcast and going forward. If you've not done so, follow me on Twitter at JJ_Kitchen40. Really appreciate you guys as always. D. Washington. Hey, man, I appreciate your passion. Use the portal, get some O-lineman. Can't protect $1 million QB with a $2 O-lineman. Couldn't agree more, brother. Guys, appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. As always and forever, no matter what happens or what the records are, hail to Pitt and hail to the ACC. I'll see you next time.